My name is Barbara Hazelden, and I'm from St. Petersburg. So I'm very delighted to be here this morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
May I sit?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
thank you.
The only way they can see you from home.
From the other side of the aisle, so to speak, about the light rail project and about the 1% sales tax referendum that PSTA is promoting in the form of Greenlight Pinellas. And I'm a local business owner. I own an insurance agency for 25 years over in Northeast St. Pete. I'm not representing any kind of a paid situation. I'm not a lobbyist for anyone. I'm simply a taxpayer who is tapped out. I am tapped out. And I think that you are all citizen legislators. You're not professional politicians, so to speak. And so I speak to you from the heart about being a homeowner in Pinellas County and caring about our county. And my daughter's children live here, and I'm representing a large faction of people, no tax for tracks, that are coming together in opposition to this, what we feel like is a duplicative system that is unnecessary. This is our public bus system, PSTA, and we have a fine bus system in PSTA. There's no doubt it's something we can really be proud of. And of course, we need a public bus system. We need a public transportation system for those less than 2% of residents in Pinellas County that need public transportation. We need to provide that. So basically, back just a few years ago, in 2001, this was PSTA up on 49th Street. It was a simple public bus agency. And PSTA, I think it's important that a lot of people don't understand exactly how the funding is for bus systems. But PSTA operations are currently 75% subsidized by the taxpayers in the form of federal and state grants of 19%, which of course is taxpayer funded. Passenger fares, their share is 25%. So of the expenses of PSTA, 25% is funded by the passengers. Advertising on the buses currently accounts for about 3% of their revenue, and ad valorem property tax from our homes is about 53% for a total of 100% of their financing. From 2001 through 2007, I call that the go-go years for all of us that owned property, because our property values skyrocketed during that time, and it really gave us a false sense of wealth. And in fact, many public agencies and cities and municipalities, began to rely on that kind of money. And Bob Lasher, who is a public relations gentleman with PSTA, was quoted in the St. Pete Times in 2007 as saying, we're getting frequency in service to the point where people say, oh, well, if I miss a bus, I'll just have to wait 15 minutes. But the fuel and operational costs have gone up staggeringly, Mr. Lasher said. What the translation of that is that more buses and more drivers equals higher bus frequency. And it's important that we understand how that works, that higher bus frequency is because you have more equipment and more drivers. So much so that by 2005, PSTA left their facility on 49th Street and built a $40 million facility, doubling their space and their expenses and expanding their bus lines. And this graph I simply put in to give a dramatic depiction of what happened to the revenue from property taxes. And I'm sure I don't have to tell you folks because you also experienced that. But basically what we have here, of course, is that property taxes from 2002 skyrocketed up to a high in 2007, a high water mark, and then began to decline. And the black line over there shows when PSTA had to raise their taxes in order to try to boost their income back up. I have with me a laser, but apparently it's not going to work on this TV, on this type of screen. But what we see here is that as you see the blue bars descend, that represents the exact descension of our homeowners, of the values in our homes. And so their income is tied directly to the value of our property. And as the property went down by 2011, they had gone from a high water mark of $37 million from the ad valorem portion of their income down to 26.5. And at that point is when PSTA then sought and passed a increase, a 30% increase in their take from our ad valorem property, boosting it back up to 32.8. But as you can see, they were still $5 million behind where they were 5 years earlier. However, their spending continues to go on even yet today. Starting in 2002, this is, by the way, slides from PSTA. I have been attending PSTA meetings now for 2 years. And I have been, of course, have access to the slides that they present. So a lot of what you're going to see with the PSTA logo in the bottom are their actual slides. This is a very recent slide from PSTA showing what the PSTA spending was 2002, going through the years. And as you can see, it's been a steady increase following exactly what I was just explaining, which is as our taxes, our property value went up, our taxes went up, and their spending went up. And the green line is their presumption that we're going to pass a 1% sales tax referendum in 2014 and save them from the fact that the spending is already still projected to continue upward, even though their revenue is not. So that's why they're wanting to get the 1% sales tax through in 2014. Again, this is their own slide. The blue line shows the addition of more bus lines throughout the years without the need. And so as their income went up, what does a bus service do in order to spend money? They add buses. They add buses, they have drivers, they add routes. Even if there's no need, they just continue to add. And that's what's gotten us in the situation where we are today. So you can see that is there's a direct correlation between the amount of money they were receiving and the amount of money they were spending. Have you noticed the empty buses around town? Have you noticed the empty buses with black windows? The windows are getting so black you can't even see who's inside of the buses, but I've gotten in the buses and there's not people in those buses oftentimes. The buses are getting bigger and bigger and the windows are getting blacker and blacker, and currently we now have 204 buses in Pinellas County doing 5,100 bus stops on 43 routes, and 14 million trips in 2012. The annual budget is $62 million for operations. That doesn't include their capital budget. They have 584 employees. The annual mileage driving around the county is 8.5 million miles. And the CEO's salary, $170,000 a year. He was hired in 2011 from the Charlotte Transit System with the specific task of trying to get light rail through in Pinellas County. In 2010, they issued a severe projection. And this is a 3-year budget projection from the year 2010. And again, you can see PSTA's logo is on this page. And in 2010, they said, in 2011, we're going to be operating $2 million in the red. In 2012, we're going to be operating at $5.7 million in the red. In 2013, a whopping $8 million in the red. So, therefore, they presented this as evidence that they needed a tax increase in 2012. So they did pass that. But you know, PST doesn't really have a revenue problem. It is a spending problem. And PSTA raised the taxes on our homes in 2012 by 30%, but still, as I said, they continue to outspend their income. Now, PSTA CEO Brad Miller is warning the county and the public that if a new sustainable funding source is not found, PSTA services will have to be cut 30% by 2016, meaning routes, buses, and drivers. And of course, PSTA is basically at their millage cap. Now, they have raised their millage from 0.56 in 2011 to 0.7305, and their millage cap is 0.75. So they're very close to being at their millage cap, and that's the reason they need a new sustainable funding source, or they're going to have to downsize. So PSTA is at a crossroad. They need to either get smaller or get bigger. And here's the big idea. And the big idea is light rail. Green Light Pinellas, I know that you've seen this year a campaign, which again is taxpayer funded. They spent $300,000 initially to have this logo drawn up and come up with a game plan to promote the idea of a light rail system. And in order for this to work, I have here just as a reminder to me to just say, you know, we live in a society today, each one of us do, where we have the keys to our car, we have a cell phone, and control of our money. And basically, for this system to work, we're going to have to, all of us, to some degree, put down the keys to our car, and we're going to have to realize that the way that your cell phone can ring and your whole day will change. Has that ever happened to you, where you know your cell phone rings and all of a sudden, uh-oh, I've got to go pick up my wife because she's sick, or I've got to go pick up my child at school. This has changed everything, this cell phone, in many, many ways. And to be on a train in Clearwater, dependent upon maybe grabbing a cab, I think that we have to start kind of thinking about this. Is this the lifestyle that we're heading towards, or is this the lifestyle that we've left? Because we're going to also have to put in so much money to this. To expand, the Pinellas voters must approve a massive 14% increase in the Pinellas sales tax from 7 to 8%. This is going to make us the highest sales tax in the state of Florida. And here is the math. The ad valorem property tax currently, as I already explained, is $32 million a year in the budget of PSTA. The 1% sales tax increase is $130 million that would go into PSTA. This is a huge $100 million tax increase, and they are calling it a swap. They're saying that the sales tax is going to replace the property tax, and it is an attempt to brand an increase as a swap. $130 million for $32 million is not a swap. Revenue neutral is a swap. And this is, in my opinion, a massive tax grab. A swap would be if I were to swap Arthur this glass of water for that glass of water. That's a swap. This for that is not a swap. In fact, it is just a promise anyway, because nothing will prohibit them from recapturing this tax down the road, or should I say down the track. The facts is that there's no demand by the public for light rail or more buses. There's no need for expansion of our public transportation system, and we can fix the bus system now by correcting the inefficiencies. PSTA's own public surveys and studies offer the proof that they ignore, such as the baseline surveys taken in September 2010. This is the Pinellas County Transportation Task Force that was set up by Commissioner Karen Seal with 25 initial members from around the county. One of the first things that they did was to hire a poll, and this poll was conducted in Pinellas County. 502 likely general election voters with a margin of error of plus or minus 4.37%. There were many questions, but I'm just going to bring up a couple of that I think are very key. What is the most important issue for local government to deal with? That is the question on this particular question on this survey. 48% of the people said jobs and the economy. That was the number one important thing that they thought the government should deal with. 2% said to reduce traffic congestion in Pinellas County. 5% said expanding public transit systems. My point on this is that there's no demand. How about the use of public transit? How often do you use public transportation? Now, according to, and I'm going to get into this in just a second, but according to the U.S. Census in 2010, 1.6% or less than 2% of people in Pinellas County specifically use public transportation. But in this survey, 3% said that they use transportation. The small blue line up there. How often do you use public transit? Very frequently was 3%. So according to their own surveys, there's no demand, no need. Still, they implemented an alternative analysis study which is defined as a local feasibility study that's required by the Transportation Authority in seeking grant money that is meant to identify the best mode and the preferred route. Pinellas Rail Advocates championed this effort, and it cost us $4 million to do the alternative analysis here in Pinellas County that ran for about 18 months. Out of this alternative analysis, they came up with the route. And the route starts down here in Pinellas County where the box is around, that black box is around downtown St. Pete. And the preferred route is going to go up from St. Petersburg and snake through and go on over into Clearwater. That's a 26-mile route that's going to be proposed. Now, to the unknowing eye, you might assume that that line that goes across over to Tampa is also a part of this rail route project. But no, it's not a part of the plan. The 1% sales tax referendum that we're going to be asked to approve in November 2014 for improved transit in Pinellas County does not include the bridge. Now, they hired a public campaign firm, Tucker Hall, out of Tampa, and so far $750,000 have been paid for this campaign, Greenlight Pinellas. And their contractual mission, I have the contract, is to get the sales tax increase referendum passed. So far, between the $4 million for the alternative analysis and $750,000 so far spent on Greenlight Pinellas to convince us that this is something that we need to do, we're at $5 million right now in this economy trying to railroad us, trying to champion this cause, under the name of Greenlight Pinellas. Now, some of the things that Tucker Hall suggested to them, number one, is that they need to promote the belief of record ridership on the buses. And I know that all of us have seen in the newspaper, on WFLA, on the radio, on television even, that PSTA has got record ridership going on, and no doubt there are more people riding the buses now than ever due to the economy. Again, have you noticed the empty buses all over town? But how does PSTA count bus riders? This was a very interesting question to me. How could it be that they have 1.2 million bus riders per month when we have 900,000 residents in the county? That just perplexed me. And one day I was at one of the PSTA meetings, and one of the elderly ladies got up and she was complaining about one of the buses being late, and she said, I have to take 3 transfers from my home to the mall and 3 transfers back. And I went, bingo, 6 rides. That's how they count bus riders. We hear reports of record bus ridership of over 1 million rides per month coming from PSTA, but the fact is that a typical trip to the mall from home consists of 3 routes with transfers, 3 to the mall and 3 home. So one bus rider goes to the mall and returns home and racks up 6 rides in one trip. So one rider equals 6 rides. Let's talk about the Pinellas bus study that is just wrapping up. The Federal Transportation Authority, they require a bus study, as I understand it, in order for them to go forward with grant applications for rail. And so for the first time, I have been told, and believe it or not, 20 years, they have actually done a bus study. So they've just continued, as I showed you earlier, to add more and more buses without knowing if they're needed, nor going back and checking to see how successful they are. This is a very shocking slide here. Again, this is a PSTA slide. This is a picture of the 43 routes of the PSTA. This is their unaltered slide. I have not altered this slide in any way. And this tells you that this is on the left-hand side. That square is the top 5 bus routes. Down at the other end, the blue, those are trolleys. So we have 2 successful trolleys. I think it's St. Pete Beach and downtown St. Pete. And then you have those 5. And it tells you here the top 5 local routes account for 46% of the system ridership. And the PSTA trolley services account for 13% of the system ridership. So combined, those 7 routes account for 60% of their business. Before we leave this slide, I want to point out the green little teeny ones down there at the end. Those are the buses that go across to Tampa. 137 people on an average day will ride over to Tampa and back. And this, we're talking about a $1 billion bridge to put a rail in. The waste of our money is just breathtaking. Just a few months ago, PSTA took delivery of 8 new buses at $600,000 apiece and actually took them down to the Coliseum to show them off to the public. This was in the St. Pete Times the day after. This is a $4.8 million purchase in March. And in this article, and I'm sorry, I know you can't see it from here, it says basically, oh well, the federal government paid for these, as though that's free money. That is our money that we are borrowing from China. Yet, doubling the bus inventory is going to be the leading message, and I'm sure you've already heard that. They don't want to talk much about the light rail in this 1% sales tax referendum. They want to talk about doubling the buses. And the surveys have revealed that the light rail is not a popular subject with voters, as evidenced by the 2010 sound defeat by voters in Hillsborough County. So Tucker Hall says, shh, don't say rail. Say more buses and play down the rail. This is all about rail, and it's also all about big land deals. Low-ball cost and high-ball ridership projections, that is a very typical practice in these public work projects. So low-balling how much things are going to cost to implement this program, and high-balling what the ridership projections are going to be. This is Lynx, which is out of Charlotte, and this is or excuse me, I think this is out of Portland. This shows the bus ridership, the rail ridership reported to the public is the orange, and reported officially to the Transportation Authority is in the green. So you can see in 2008, they were reporting higher to the public than they were actually putting on paper to the Transit Authority. In 2009, look at the difference. In Portland area, commuters using transit has actually dropped since they started installing their light rail system. In 1980, they had almost 10% of people in Portland that were riding buses. It has cannibalized the bus system, and they've actually, the service has dropped, and they actually have gone to this level. This is from the Cato Institute, by the way, of transportation, public transportation usage by 2010. What about Charlotte's 9.6-mile rail? In 1998, they passed a sales tax referendum. They did a half-cent sales tax referendum, and they began operations in 2007. So it took them 9 years to build a 9-mile track. Now they are out of money, and they need a $5 billion in order to build more rail and the maintenance. The maintenance is something that is a huge topic. Now Charlotte, I've taken this out of the newspapers, Google search, and this is a Charlotte Observer. This is a story that appear, there were many of them, but this is one. The Huntersville mayor, Jill Swain, which would be, one of the satellite communities right there in Charlotte, on April 12th, she said, "This is not a happy story. Original plans to fund transit are completely and totally obsolete." And then also, May 6th, the Charlotte Observer reports, Charlotte Mayor Anthony Fox suggested creating a task force earlier this year to find ways to pay for promised transit projects that are impossible to build without more money. Is this the hole we're digging? The Charlotte Task Force findings. The task force estimated CATS would need to find $3.3 billion to build the remaining transit corridors, as well as $1.7 billion to operate and maintain the lines through 2024. That's the $5 billion I referred to. The report says that if all of the transit projects were to be built and maintained solely with the new transit tax, it would have to be levied at an additional 0.78 cents. This is pretty scary business, isn't it? I look at this and I think of the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, or maybe the pier downtown St. Pete, or maybe the bridge going across to the Howard Franklin to Tampa. We have a lot of infrastructure aging around our community right now. Just stop to think what would happen, and I want to mention to you that one of the biggest untalked about features about rail is the $80 billion nationally of deferred rail maintenance. Mayor Swain of Charlotte up there also said, to make up for the funding shortfall, we will have to look at more creative options and rely less on sales tax. So they've gone the sales tax route. Now they're trying to find another route. The PSTA tax swap promise could vanish in a very few short years, and we're simply going to be double taxed as they run into the same problems. Future politicians will grab the additional taxes when projections don't pan out. And you know, I know that PSTA and the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners right now, who are pretty much the same people, are trying to come up with a plan to have an interlocal agreement because the state legislature, because Governor Scott did veto HB 865 2 years ago, which would have provided for the guarantee of the tax, I'm not going to use the word swap, the switch off of ad valorem to sales tax and not to be able to ever to go back. Governor Scott said that's not going to work, and he vetoed it. So now they're trying to do an interlocal agreement so that next year they can message to us that there will be a swap. I think I've made the point here that this is just a big hole we're getting ready to jump into if we pass this. There's so much talk about rail bringing new jobs to Pinellas County. New job-bearing companies in Charlotte in 2013 did not locate on the rail line. They located on the loop, the I-485 loop, as companies tend to do. There were two major companies so far this year that have located to Charlotte, major companies. MetLife is down there where it says Pineville, bringing 1,500 new jobs, and Schley Toy Company, I believe it's out of Germany, located up there at the top. The rail system, the Charlotte rail system is down there about following 21. Do you see that? Okay, it's about 7 o'clock, and it goes into their convention center, pretty much at the crossroads there in the middle of Charlotte. How do they get to work in Charlotte? This is a great slide. This is from Mecklenburg County, North Carolina. This is their slide. Means of transportation to work. You can see the red line. Streetcar or trolley, 0%. Subway, 0%. Rail, 0%. That's in 2013. Tampa Bay leads the state on jobs in the May 18th edition of the St. Pete Times, and we're doing this without rail. The Bay Area job growth is best in the state. Comparing unemployment to Tampa Bay to the rail hero of Charlotte, you can see here that our unemployment numbers, the red is North Carolina. Their unemployment's higher than ours. It's Mecklenburg County. It's Charlotte. The red is Charlotte. The green and the blue down there is Hillsborough and Pinellas County. Charlotte may wish that they were us, because like the Hotel California, once you check in, you can't check out. Why do I say that? Because if we were to find in a few years that this rail system wasn't working for us, we have to pay back the grants. Light rail wins as the biggest loser. Again, this is a Cato slide. This shows the amount of subsidy per transportation type of transportation. So you can see, for instance, that the far to the right is L to R. That's light rail. That shows you that 80% is subsidized of the current light rail systems. Bus, just like in our own county, it's about 75 to 80% is subsidized. If you go on over to the automobile, we buy our own cars, we buy our own gas, we make our car payments, we pay for our maintenance. The roads, the highways are subsidized, but they are used by, instead of 2%, like 98%. Pinellas just has no need. Pinellas County, according to 2010 U.S. Census, this just came out about a year ago. Commuting to work, percent using public transportation, 1.6%. Car, truck, or van alone or carpool, 90%. Average commute time to work in Pinellas County, 23 minutes. We don't have a problem. New economic development. Urban rail transit investments rarely create new growth, but more typically redistribute growth that would have taken place without the investment. This is from a big report out of the Transportation Authority. It's referred to as Cervero and Susskind report. And this made me think of this. I put this together, that this made me think of growing up in Indiana. And they started the malls, and the downtown closed up, and it never recovered. It's just been lately that St. Petersburg started to recover from the malls, because basically rail is going to displace the existing businesses just like the malls did of the 60s. It's not going to create more business other than things like maybe Starbucks and Barnes and Noble, you know, things that might be leisurely types of things people can do while they're waiting on the next train. If your business is not on the route, you will be competing with it. This is important as a business owner for me and for you, if you have a business, to realize if you are anywhere north, anywhere out towards the beaches, anywhere around the mall, everything they're going to be doing is going to be promoting the 16 stops between downtown St. Pete and Clearwater. And if your business is not on that route, you're going to be competing with it. It's also become evident, this is a New York Wall Street Journal article about 2 months ago, that creating these projects displaces low-income residents. So what we're trying to do under the idea that it's going to be helping low-income residents by providing more transportation is not true. As a matter of fact, this is a story about a gentleman who lived in housing along a route that they ended up coming through and putting rail in, and then the owner of the housing came in and said, wow, we're on the rail system. I'm going to put some money in to make this a really nice place and raise the rent. And the fellow lost his home. I have a few very low-cost visionary ideas to help with transportation. Why don't they start with a bus rapid transit express system starting downtown St. Pete and going to Clearwater with no stops? And let's see what the demand is for that. We can do that just by taking a few buses and going back and forth. This is an interesting idea. How about synchronizing the stoplights? I got to tell you, I came home last night at midnight from Disney World, and I was coming up 9th Street, and I couldn't believe there was no traffic, and I kept getting stopped by the stoplights coming up 9th Street at midnight. This is toll lanes. There's talk of toll lanes on the Howard Franklin Bridge. That could be a huge solution by having one lane that you pay extra, and you can go quickly by paying extra to be in the toll lane. I'd be glad to pay that. And it would help towards the infrastructure and costs. Because the truth is that the innovations that are coming in personal transportation. This is another Wall Street Journal article, June 27, 2013. Driverless cars are likely to get boost from the DOT ruling. DOT just did a ruling, and it said federal regulators are expected to issue new rules in the next few months that could jumpstart the market for cars that communicate with other cars and road infrastructure. Think Blockbuster. Think Blockbuster. Where is Blockbuster today? It's in a box at Publix.
Red box.
A red box. Because the future looks like this. Think Greece. Think Cyprus, Stockton, California. You know, I just saw an article a couple of days ago. Italy is getting ready to have an auction, and they're going to be auctioning off some of their old castles because the way they've been running their country is running them into bankruptcy. And of course, we're seeing that all across Europe and also in places like California. And I have no confidence in an unbiased process over next year. I have no confidence in the financial risk that we'll be taking or the light rail system as an enhancement to our community. The public bus system is in trouble. I say cut 30% of the routes and do it now. This is why we have a public bus system here. We need to save the bus system for those that depend on it. And I think that, I know for a fact that there is 30% that they could cut, and we should be demanding that they do this as a result of this bus study. They know exactly which routes. They can go to what's called the core system and eliminate an easy 30% of routes and upright this, and we can go on to our other problems and not be worrying about this. Thank you.